Good morning, colleagues in Southeast Asia. Good afternoon for our friends here on the Hawaiian Islands, and good evening for colleagues who are on the mainland of the US. For those in Europe, I'm afraid it's probably too late. I'm Miriam Stark, and I'm the director for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies. And it's my great pleasure to open this webinar, the second of the 2026 Spring Loose Southeast Asia Transitions webinars. And this topic today is on arts and resistance, cultures of expression, censorship, and resilience in Southeast Asia. We have some excellent contributors today, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Paul Cosme, who is at the University of Hawaii and will serve as moderator. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stark. Again, echoing Dr. Stark's message, welcome to our panel entitled Arts and Resistance, Cultures of Expression, Censorship, and Resilience in Southeast Asia. I am Paul Cosme. I am a composer and an ethnomusicologist specializing in maritime Southeast Asia. And I have the pleasure of moderating our panel for today. This panel will primarily discuss how artists across various genres in the visual arts, in sound, and in words, the art of words, across Southeast Asia, how we deal with the notion of censorship and how we can create art and foster resilience through our own media under restrictive political and social environments. And today we are very privileged to have three different speakers for our panel. The first for us is Azmyl Yunor. And Azmyl Yunor is a renowned Malaysian bilingual independent singer-songwriter, musician, radio host, and writer, who has performed in countries around the the Southeast Asian region, since the late 1990s. He has published his research on the cultural politics of Malaysian music, subcultures, and mediated moral panics, and is currently researching on contemporary protest songs in Malaysia. And since 1997, he has released 9 albums and 3 extended plays or EPs as a solo artist, and also albums with his other band projects. He is the host of BFM 89.9's alternative country music show, Twang, and is one of the music category judges for Kakiseni's annual Bo Cameroonian Arts Awards. Besides, he is also a 2013 inductee of the Voice International Music Awards, or the VIMA Hall of Fame, and was awarded the Balls of Steel Award by Clive Magazine in 2012 for his unwavering independent creative spirit and vision. An award-winning musical theater entitled Something I Wrote was staged in 2013 to much acclaim, making him the only local artist other than P. Ramlee to have a musical theater performance to be based on their life and songs. Please welcome our first speaker, Azmyl Yunor.
Thank you. Okay, you all can hear me, right? All good? All right. So, okay. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, thank you for having me. I'm going to put on my artist cap for this, I suppose. I've got a QR code here. So if you guys can, well, I mean, you can watch this video later, but this is what artists have been reduced, especially musical artists nowadays. I wouldn't say have been reduced, but to gain audiences, as I've got a YouTube channel. So and this is also part of, you could say, my transmedia practice that I only took really seriously during the pandemic, actually. So a lot of what I want to share today is my attempts to kind of like attach some notion of ethics to cultural resistance through the DIY culture. Okay, so this is my QR code. Yeah, please subscribe and like. Yeah, my music videos, by the way, have subtitles in English and songs in Malay, so they travel. And that probably also has to do a lot with my background in film. So this is my general topic today. We have 15 minutes, so I'm not gonna delve too deep, but just want to share what I've been doing the last 2-3 years in I think facing several challenges that come with being a musical artist. I think the biggest thing is, of course, aging. you're in industry, well, not industry, but you're in a scene where it's pretty much dominated by youth culture. And also there's the issue about funding, how do you sustain yourself? Um, and I think the third is about leveraging what you have as a person, as an individual. So yes, the title might sound bit big, like the economics and ethics of sustainable creative resistance via transmedia collaborations in contemporary Malaysia. But I'll be spending a lot more time, I think, in this short brief period to discuss like the context, I think, about what Malaysia is. So the Ethical Troubadour was a series of tours that I'm still doing, that began actually in 2019, was just locally. Then I did it at the ISPERM Southeast Asia in Penang in 2023, but only seriously started touring it in 2024 onwards. It was my attempt to get out of the local, you could say, circuit, all right, which is very small in Malaysia. Also to engage with the region. And a lot of music, I mean, the way Malaysia, you have to understand, the music scene is very mainstream driven. Um, and I'm not just talking about the products, but also the mentality, the ideological slant. So doesn't take a lot to be called rebellious in Malaysia. Like a lot of the songs I compose have been called protest songs, even though that was never the intention. But there's only two or three really independent singers-writers who write topical songs that responds to the news. But again, that makes it an interesting landscape. So I've toured. This was from the last year, several fronts, okay, and it's completely DIY. I didn't get any funding. That's another conversation can have about how do I afford this touring. But we can have that maybe in a Q&A if you want. But this I think is important inspiration for Billie Holiday. She says that, if I'm going to sing like someone else, then I don't need to sing at all. This is very important because in Malaysia, probably friends from Philippines, your musicians are very renowned in Malaysia, playing covers, So the Malaysian, you could say, live music landscape is populated by the pub scene, which is mostly covers, and it's free entry, and people write songs on demand. So it takes a lot of guts to kind of play that kind of venue and say, sorry, I'm going to play originals tonight. I don't take, not going to take any requests. So I've done that, and of course they won't call me back, but it's fine. That's part of my, you could say, field work. So it's important to also, I think, understand that I think my background's not music. Even though I'm a musician, I majored in film, TV production, and journalism, a double major. That's why I'm now attached to the film and music department in my university, because the National Qualification Board doesn't allow somebody without music degree to teach music program, which is a shame, because I don't get to engage music students. So I appreciate such invitations like this. And also, this is also part of my outreach. The irony is that I've been doing these lecture performances at music faculties and departments everywhere except in Malaysia at the moment. So I like to say that I write dialogues because my training's in film and script writing, but this also, I think, later on geared me to being like what you call a folk musician. I have a good friend from Philippines. His name is Danny Fabella. He's based here recently, so we've really gotten really close as friends, and we've spoken a lot about, I think, how to sustain. And one thing I understand about, let's say, I'm using Philippines is interesting because there is, cultural link, right? We're part of the Nusantara, but of course the history of colonization, all this separated us. But often our conversations will evolve around these three things. I think the main thing is economics, because you can be a full-time protesting in the Philippines because there's the conditions and etc. Not in Malaysia, not so. There's also the resist. How do you maintain? How do you sustain yourself in terms of economics? Making songs that delve within the field of resistance and dealing with, you could say, censorship. Identity is a big part. Part of my big thing is really resisting the kind of hegemonic representation of what is a Malay. So I'm an ethnic Malay, a Malay Muslim. But in Malaysia, the Malay Muslims are majority, so there's also a rise in political Islam in Malaysia. So you could say I am resisting that, using that as a template, which a lot of Malay musicians don't do because they're afraid they're not going to get audiences or gigs. But me being independent from underground and from the punk scene, this is kind of, it's natural. And of course, all of this is driven by, a certain kind of ethical drive that I'm seeking. Like, why did I choose this sort of mode of operation? Yeah, because primarily driven by this. So this is just some of the performance lectures I've done. Pretty cool posters from universities. And I've used different titles for my lecture performances, just to vary it, but they're all under the larger kind of thing called the ethical troubadour. And it's often delved about my creative collaborations with like-minded artists in Malaysia, and also some who have left the country because the kind of cultural restrictions that happen here. I'll just go through quickly the economics of how does artists operate, how do you use a medium? In other words, myself, how do I operate? So I've always been independent, and I was late to punk, you could say. Only in my early 20s when I was a student in Australia, I was a busker because I couldn't get a part-time job, which was the best decision ever. Because my music school was the streets. But friends in my bands back home would send cassettes because my band, Malaysia, when after I left, they became a noise experimental band. And the only scene they could really play was a punk scene. And they started sending me cassettes back, and I would start to record on my tape recorder. This is where I was introduced to DIY culture. And it was a very powerful moment because it empowered you to you used to record on tape, and you just think that, oh yeah, this is a demo. Then I realized that it's not a demo, it's a legit piece of work. It counts, So this is where the aesthetic becomes part of, I think, the ideological resistance. Like, why is it so scratchy? Why is it so lo-fi? Then it's a big finger up to the man, you could say, even in its form. So I just put this here, a DIY musician. What does it mean? Well, an artist, this is my own definition. Whereas other variety means of supporting themselves financially to stay creatively independent outside the industry norms, which is usually informed, supported by subcultural practices and networks. So this has been my modus operandi. This is me starting as a busker. Good money, I must say. The Australian crowd is very generous. I love your $2 coins. Plus, it's very interesting because in the late 90s, I was the only Asian busker there. And in Malaysian society, being a busker has negative connotations, that you're a drug addict or you're down of your luck. But again, when I was busking, the DIY thing came in. I didn't want to buy an amp. I didn't want to spend anything. I want to make sure that I have a high ROI, so to put it that way. Okay, so I did not spend on amps. I learned about architecture, like where can I get resonance? I would find places with this. There wasn't much tunnels in Perth, but there were roof covered, so I would play in the mall under those things that would amplify my voice. I learned a lot about performance also because you're playing to nobody, essentially. How do you attract people? But being the only Asian also became a draw. So people look at me weird. Oh, it's that voice and the face doesn't match. Here's my change. Cigarettes, people gave me a bottle of Jack Daniels once. It's fascinating. And I think I had a completely different experience from probably 99.9% of Southeast Asian students in Perth that year, because I noticed I was the only one. That's just me dreaming, playing a guitar on my tennis racket. I spent a bit of time kind of homeless, wandering. I went back to Australia, Melbourne, 2022 to 2002 to do my master's, and this is where I started to really start thinking critically about my works. What does it mean? Where am I going with this? This is my recording, early stuff. That was my recording studio, basically, right in the middle there. It's just a tape recorder. My earlier bands were this. This looks very punk, but I didn't know about Sex Pistols yet at this time. I was just doing this because I thought it looked cool, and friends back home say this is like punk, man. So this all the albums I produced, and they're all collaborations with a lot of local artists, photographers. The network that I built when I came back to Malaysia at the end of 2002. I virtually didn't have any network. Started going to gigs, meeting people, and my band essentially are volunteers. People will come up to me, yes, no, you need bandmates. So I had the pleasure of not having to audition to judge musicians. So my way of working is always based on solidarity. These are my album collaborators. They're also two of them are singer-songwriters. One's a drummer, Rajay over there. I think this is quite important to sustain yourself, is to find collaborators from their home studios. I never bothered learning the tech because I didn't have time. I think that's also another thing that I started to notice. Yes, DIY is great, but you also have to leverage on your biggest asset, which is time. I think we tend to forget that. So I know a lot of local guys who I'm trying to learn this software, that software. I say I have no time for that. I'll meet friends who have a home studio, who have a studio, and I started producing these albums DIY. So all of this was on my own. This I want to talk a bit about this album I released 2020. That I record really on a shoestring, live in 3 hours in a studio, in 2019, because I wanted to release it during in 2020 before we know the pandemic came. But I stuck to my guns. I wanted to release this. No damn virus is going to stop me from releasing this. So, and also his first collaboration with my dad. That's his handwriting there, by the way. He had no idea that it's going to be on an album. Make merchandises, but I want to talk about this because the artists involved here are from Borneo, Malaysia, Sabah. They're called Punk Rock Sulap. They're later in the slide, but I just talk about it now. So again, they're a group of political artists who are aligned ideologically, politically to me, right? So just to quickly kind of run through, because I think I'm running out of time. This is also a bit of cultural jamming, taking a visit Malaysia in 2020 and putting my own sticker on it to call my band that. And the irony that Truly Asia is the tourism slogan for Malaysia. My band actually got selected by Tourism Malaysia to tour the US, and that's the first time ever that's happened to me. Identity, this I'll just briefly go through this. My stage name is Azmyl Yunor, but this is a form of resistance, to you could say the kind of patriarchal leaning. This is my wife, she's Iban. It's a long story about culture. Again, being Malay, what does it mean? You can be all these different things. But even my name, I think this is the biggest resistance that I'm doing to the patriarchal culture. My full given name is actually Azmyl Yusuf. The Malay name, patronymic name, second name is not a surname, it's a father's name. And I always thought, hey, I'm a product of a collaboration myself with my mom. Where's my mom's name in it? So Yunor is actually a combination of my parents' name. My mom's name is Norani. So I thought about this in high school. So this goes way back. Yeah, this is my bands. Again, just quickly breezing through. I've done a bit of theater, film, etc. But ethics, I think I just want to wrap this up on ethics. I think why do I choose this way? Because I think I have to take this mode because I find it in Malaysia, I can't just sing and be happy. This is Joki, another punk doyen in Malaysia. He's collaborated with me, helped design my albums. This is Rizzo from Punk Rock Sulap. So these are artists who align, I think, with my ideology, my political ideology. And I didn't start off as being political. I became a political artist because I felt that, hey, why somebody's got to sing about this, somebody's got to talk about this. And I'm primarily a live performer. This is a big inspiration of mine. Najib Razak, the jailed former Prime Minister of Malaysia. Inspiration can come in different places. So he inspired me a lot because he made me angry. But this is not a criminal, it's my usual collaborator, is a filmmaker. His name's Wee Jun. He has also a very punk rock aesthetic to shooting his videos. So these are some of the videos we've done. But I'm from a town called Bangi. The ruling party in this district is the Islamic Party. So this is another thing. There's a lot of moral policing happening in Malaysia. Why isn't somebody writing about this? So I started collaborating with a friend. Her name's Shika. She's a LGBT artist, trans, but she's left the country because a lot of trans artists in Malaysia find it very hard to live here, to earn a living. And Arjun is a Malaysian who's doing a master's as a filmmaker in Taiwan. So we collaborated on this, poking fun at the religious moral police. Oh yeah, I'm at a slide, end of my slides already. Yeah, I mean, so this is the landscape that I'm dealing with now. All these different platforms are kind of diluted the spots where you are. If you want to follow me, I'm mostly here. I post a lot of my stuff here, but my YouTube channel. Spotify, I never liked it. Long story. But again, I think why I stay ethical because I want to stay curious. I don't want to think about my balance sheets, who to please. I need to be self-motivated. I think resilience is the main thing that doesn't get addressed a lot in Malaysia. And I think having an ethical base really drives that resilience. And from that, you think about the economics, you think about the identity, who you want to present yourself with. So TikTok, yeah, I'm there, but I'm just duplicating the stuff I have. I'm not taking this, not yet, I don't know. This is the landscape we're at. I'm trying to resist, but resisting social media is probably the next landscape. But I'm still touring primarily because I think the live setting is where you have the liminal spaces where especially the banter, there's things that you can address that is not present in just a pure performance. And whatever it is, I don't want to end up being orientalizing myself as an indigenous figure and person. So thank you. I mean, I'm on time, right? All right. Thank you. That's my brief pitch and sale.
Teri, makasih banyak,
Most
Azmyl.
welcome.
Um, Thank you for sharing your rich experiences as an artist and your reflections on it. There's a lot to be gained out of like looking at your experiences as an artist and also so reflexive in a way like working in a university. And this ties in really well to our next speaker, who is Ani Pacaña. So Ani Pacaña is an artist who explores the layers of meanings encrypted in the city's urban forms through her linescapes, kaleidoscopes, and soundscapes. Her practice highlights moving image works that tend to aestheticize the visual chaos in Metro Manila, where she lives. She takes the visual pollution of Metro Manila's infrastructure and transforms them into moving image projections, creating spaces of contemplation in the midst of chaos, pitting reality against fantasy to map urban experience using digital vector line animation, video projections, and backlit digital prints. The city is seen as a reflection of the self, where navigating personal internal chaos untangles that of the public external environment. Pacaña's practice forges interdisciplinary collaborations with sound art, performance, fashion, and literature. Her works had been presented in solo and group local and international exhibitions, and she received a jury special mention in the 2023 Artist in Residency Osaka Volume 7 of the Japan Foundation. Annie has also curated art exhibits, one of which, Materiality, a group exhibit of artists who are mothers, have had 3 iterations presented since 2022. Annie is currently an associate professor at the Department of Visual Communication, College of Fine Arts, and a director of the Office of Community Relations at the University of the Philippines. She started her visual art practice alongside her graduate studies in 2015, though her background and professional practice is in graphic design. She has also published Filipino children's storybooks as an author and illustrator since 2010. Please help me in welcoming Ani Pacaña to the floor here.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Um, Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. Should I begin the presentation? Okay. Okay, where is it? Sorry. Try that again. Okay. All right. Is it viewable? Okay. So good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Ani Pacaña, and I teach at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. I am here to present on the topic Artists and Arts in Sustaining Creative Resistance. Okay, let me introduce myself. This is my work from the exhibit Drift. I'm a visual artist who use moving image and installation, but my material is usually the urban infrastructure or something in my urban environment. Okay, so in 2023, I had this exhibit at Vargas Museum. So usually my subject matters are wires, because if you go to the Philippines and you go to Metro Manila, you'll see loads of hanging wires in numerous posts. All right, so I use that and turn it into something contemplative, or at least in an installation. These are some of my exhibits. And I also do collaborations by way of projecting my video works. And then I engage with sound artists and contemporary dance artists for a performance for a live audience. Okay. This is one of the installations I had at Vinyl on Vinyl Gallery recently. And some some of the an example of how when I say I capture the chaos and then translate it into something kaleidoscopic, whether as print or moving image works. But I'm here to talk about the sustenance for creative resilience in an exhibit I curated since 2022. It's called Materiality. And it's an exhibit of artists who are mothers. Okay, so the title Materiality, so the concept of the show is from that word. No, I was deciphering the word materiality, and mater being the Latin for mother, and then there's the material and reality. So I put it together to put up this show, and I gathered artists who are mothers and whose works, whose the material of which create new meanings in and out of its context. And it is very similar to a mother, the corporeal essence of motherhood in bearing and caring for the child. And so it is when we do our artworks. So this started during the pandemic. So to be able to get in touch, we had Zoom video conference calls like this. And then the only prompt for the artists were to use the materials that they use in their artworks, because they are this is a multidisciplinary exhibit where works range from paintings, tapestry, embroidery, etc. And they were also asked to present 3-minute videos, which I will show later towards the end of the show, of the presentation. So here we are in our Zoom. So that materiality, when it started in 2022, only a few people were able to see the show, because during that time in the Philippines or in Metro Manila, it was still locked down. So in 2024, I put it out again here at the College of Fine Arts in the University of the Philippines. And so it is staged to a wider audience, to students and to the community. And then recently, just this December 2025, a collective called 98B invited us for their Escolta Biennale. So I presented for the third time Materiality, but in each there is a different presentation. So the first Materiality was at Art Informal Gallery, and these are the artists involved, a mix of artists who are mothers, and some have their daughters with them. Meanwhile, I presented also a work of my mother. We presented our video portraits in the exhibit. And this is Giona Zoleta, one of the artists, and she had the whole wall to herself, and these are her works, ranging from paintings and drawings. And this is the work of Catalina Africa, an installation, one of which she collaborated with her daughter. And this is by Veronica Lasso, a tapestry. This work is by Katia Guerrero, an installation of a painting and other text-based works. And her daughter, who did a performance, an art performance, and the title of which is Witch Hunt. Another artist, Masi Oliveria, has acrylic paintings. And this one is by Con Cabrera, Community. What's happening? Oh, it went off. Okay, I'll find it again.
I think it was just a connectivity issue. Let's just, yeah.
Okay, there, I retrieved it. So yeah, she associates with the strong women in her life. Samantha Feleo has crystals, and she presented it in a table in a room in the gallery. There's also this presentation by Tanya Villanueva and her daughter, Ollie. And Ollie had a drag performance during the opening. As for my work, I presented at the outdoor space a projection of my work. This is a video work which is reflected on I laid some windshields, to reflect and to make the image multiplied for the viewers. And in one part of the gallery is also an installation of my mother's cross-stitch works, but I just showed the back of it because my mom really sews really nicely her cross-stitch, and it apparently it is the back that you judge when you sew something like that. And then against a huge projection of my work, the value of X. Also, it's something that speaks about the X chromosome and women. Okay. Next. Okay. For the 2024 materiality presentation at the College of Fine Arts, there are additional artists. Pauline Despi was added, Len, who else? Cindy Aquino, all of which are artists who are mothers. And this is the space. This is the work of Con Cabrera. This is the work of Len. It's a multimedia work and with the painting and the installation. We also had joined us Gail Vicente, who was early on in her motherhood. So this work, Drink Wine, is a tapestry. This is my work on the left. It's a projection on the glass windshields, whose refraction on the wall presents something like an aurora borealis, and the work is therefore titled Aurora. And this one is by another moving image work by Pauline Despi. Okay. This is if you saw previously, Samantha Fileo had the small crystals. Now she made it huge, and she presented it in a way like as if it's in a laundry, and a small table and soap beside it. Okay. These are the works of Tanya and Oli, and then of Masi Oliveria. This is a quilt made out of used children's clothes of the artist Jen Suarez. And this is Spotty Lesaguis, and her work is silk screen printed. It's like placemats, or and with the names of the artists in the show, and she entitled it Hot Mamas. Again, Catalina Africa, who is from Baler, Philippines, joined in the show, and this is her work, and a video accompanies the work. So this is a view of the show. Part of the program of the College of Fine Arts, we also had the art salon now of Tanya Villanueva. There were haircuts, tattoo, and face makeup, etc. Okay, so 2025 materiality is with Escolta Biennale. Escolta is a place in Manila, an old Manila vibe, and then they invited us there. So materiality now still with the same roster of artists, but we added Tita Ledesma and Ilyang. And then there's also the Hilata program, which is what they call the tambay, where you just stay and how can you perform without performing, so to speak. So this is the space. It is at a co-working space in the First United building. These are the works. This is the work of Veronica Lasso, a tapestry. And then on the right is the work of Con Cabrera. It's still the peelings of onion and garlic, which she framed into this piece. And then Tita Ledesma had an installation of a bowl from Nepal, and then viewers are invited to interact with them. And this is the work of Len Len, presenting something like a table piece, but there are sharp objects. Her interpretation. This is a video work of Pauline Despy. Tapestry curtain by Jen Suarez. And then a photograph by Cindy. Okay, I'll run through this. Okay. Hi. Yeah. So yeah, if there are questions later on, I can present some more. And maybe I'll present the video later. Thank you.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you so much, Annie, for the wonderful work and the presentation. And now let's move on to also all the questions, we'll pull them together towards the end after our third speaker. And speaking of which, our third speaker is Dr. Patricia Nguyen, and she's an artist, educator, and scholar born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. She's currently an assistant professor in American Studies at the University of Virginia. Her research and performance work examines the intersections between the military and prison industrial complex, forced migration, oral histories, inherited trauma, torture, and nation building in the United States and Southeast Asia. Through embodied research, performance, installation, and community happenings, she explores ecologies of migration, incarceration, asylum, borders, and war to reveal histories of violence and create abolitionist futures. She has published work in Amerasia, Women's Studies Quarterly, Harvard Kennedy School's Asian American Policy Review, Women and Performance, Journal of Asian American Studies, and the Funambulist. Dr. Nguyen has over 15 years of experience working in arts education, community development, and human rights in the United States, Brazil, and Vietnam. She has facilitated trainings and workshops with the Prison plus Neighborhood Arts/Education Project, 96 Acres, Kumba Links, Young Cultural Stewards with the Chicago Park District, the Fulbright Program, the American Center at the U.S. Embassy, Jane Addams Hull House, Christina Noble Foundation, Social Workers Association in Vietnam, and Asian Human Services, Illinois Humanities Envisioning Justice, #Let Us Breathe Collective, on issues ranging from incarceration, contemporary art, forced migration, mental health, youth empowerment, and language access. As a performance artist, she has performed at the Nasan Collective in Vietnam, Mission Cultural Center in San Francisco, Jane Addams Hall House, Lynx Hall, Milwaukee Art Museum, Prague Quadrennial, Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Chile, and Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago. She is the co-founder and lead artist of Axis Lab, a public art and mutual aid project that focuses on artistic and gastronomic interventions to advocate for ethical development. In recent news, Dr. Nguyen is an award-winning memorial designer for the Chicago Torture Justice Memorial Project, the first monument in the United States to honor survivors of police violence. Please welcome Dr. Patricia Nguyen.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that introduction. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank Ima for the invitation, Paul for moderating, Miriam, and all the organizers, and also both my co-panelists. I really enjoyed listening to both your presentations, and I'm so excited for the conversation afterwards. All right, so I'll share my screen. And I'll start off with just a little bit of writing that I've done. So I was asked to speak about diasporic artists and the arts in sustaining a creative practice. And I'm a child of refugees born in the United States. And a lot of the times when I'm returning to Southeast Asia and Vietnam specifically, I have to be conscious of my own positionality and privilege, and also be conscious of what it does mean to navigate issues of censorship and state surveillance. All right. Diasporic return can be dismissed as overly romanticized notions of home and roots, a conception of a captured past encapsulated in the present, suspended in time. The dismissal of the desire to return as a purely romantic gesture rejects a bodily compass towards how we make sense of the world and letting our body take the lead as a mode of knowledge production. Exiled, dispossessed, or simply a child of the diaspora, a desire for return takes the form of longing taste buds, as nostalgia for home embedded itself in food. This presentation focuses on the poetics of gastronomy, diasporic art, and sustaining creative resistance. And I'm really drawing from Caribbean theorist Eduardo Glissant and his work on the poetics of relation, where he's drawing on Deleuze and Guattari's theory of the rhizome, which is really thinking about the enmeshment of all these different root systems. And so he writes that that is a foundational notion, the rhizomatic thought, to his idea of poetics of relation. So I'm playing with that a little bit and thinking about the poetics of gastronomy and food and how the diaspora comes to understand themselves through food and are able to connect with home and just like a notion of belonging and community and ancestors through the process of making and creating and distilling food in all these different ways. And so for this presentation, I'll focus mainly on two pieces of artwork that I've done. One is entitled Sense of Home, and the other is entitled Subverting Empire's Plate. And both looks at different histories of forced migration in the Vietnamese diaspora. The first really thinks about the Vietnamese diaspora in the United States. And it's a project that I collectively collaborated with Access Lab on, which is an organization I co-founded in Chicago. And Subverting Empire's Plate is actually a project that took place in Senegal. And it's inspired by a beautiful piece of artwork and film created by Tuong Andrew Nguyen, who's also another Vietnamese American artist, that speaks about the history of French colonialism in Vietnam. All right, so I guess before I get into this a little bit, I do want to talk about my relationship to the themes of the panel as well, and thinking about expression and censorship and resilience. And so much of my experiences in Vietnam as somebody who was born in the diaspora is having to navigate what it means to be somebody who is a child of refugees who was literally born on the other side of the war in many ways, and have to be conscious of what it is that I'm saying, what it is that I'm doing, and who I'm associated with. And so my performance practice was grounded in performance poetry and spoken word. And it was through kind of facing censorship and state surveillance in different ways that I shifted to performance art and really thinking about different modes of abstract expression, or thinking about how we distill the cultural meanings of different objects and stories through gesture and performance. So anyways, so sense of home. So this is a map a little bit, and I wanted to show basically this is where Vietnam is, Southeast Asia, right? And the first project is our interviews in Chicago, actually here in North America, with Vietnamese refugees who migrated after 1975, after the end of the Vietnam-American War. And then the second project is focused on West Africa and Senegal in particular, and really thinking about the Vietnamese Senegalese population that lives there. All right, sense of home. So sense of home is playing with the idea of how smells can conjure memory, and memories of where we were, what happened, who was around us. And so a lot of the times, Vietnamese refugees or people who have survived war or atrocities are asked their experiences in ways that could re-trigger them or traumatize them. And so part of the project that we wanted to do was ask people what their memory of home was through a scent or a smell that resonated with them, that still stays and lingers with them. And that was actually our entry point to then understand their memories of Vietnam during the war itself. And so this is just a map of the refugee flows after the end of the Vietnam-American War and how people were forced to migrate by boat and by land. And so I'm just following the different waterways. And so then it was in thinking about water, because in Vietnamese, nước also means homeland, nation, and country. We wanted to play with nước as actual material, both aesthetic and political material, to excavate what it means to be in the diaspora. And so we wanted to create essential oils based off of these different smells that people had shared with us about their memories. So this is actually a distillation machine where you create essential oils using boiling water and the fresh herbs itself, and you distill it. So just thinking about like when you're forced to migrate, when you're forcibly having to leave home, like what elements stays with you, like what parts of you actually linger and stay in your body and you keep with you. And so we created all these different senses, including lemongrass, basil, pepper and fish mint. There are all these different senses. And we exhibited at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, the Linden Sculpture Museum, and also at local community events to make sure that everybody had access to it. And what was really powerful was that when we exhibited at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, there was a group of Vietnamese students at the University of Illinois, Chicago, who came, who said that we've never been to this museum before, but we felt like because we could see ourselves in the story that you were telling, we wanted to come. And so we had four different stations set up. The first one is we offered the prompt to everyone, which was, what smell reminds you of home? And everybody drew their different senses that they remembered and they recalled, including incense and different foods and herbs and spices and all of that. And so, for example, one person interviewed their mom, and she recalled the smell of basil. And she talked about how she remembered basil in this mixed street food that she would eat. And she recalled eating it in 1968. And she's literally eating the street food on the curb in what is now known as Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon. And she remembers bombs going off around her, but that she's enjoying this moment of connection and intimacy with her friends in this moment. And this herb actually brings out and recalls this memory for her. And then another story is fishmet, where my father was actually incarcerated after the war in re-education camps. And he, they forced him into hard labor and malnutrition, and he witnessed a lot of executions. It was is quite violent in so many ways, but part of the malnourishment that imprisoned people had to experience was their bowels were all messed up. There was a lot of inflammation, hernias, hemorrhoids, everything. And so he recalled like finding this fish mint in the wild and how it actually helped him with inflammation in the body. And it became this medicine that he foraged for while he was imprisoned after the war in 1975. And so we collected all those stories, and we have like the story itself here. We also have recipe and like tasting notes, and we have the fresh herbs themselves so that people could both smell the essential oil but also touch the actual material of the herbs and the spices and feel their oils and their hands kind of interact with the object, the cultural object itself. And part of that was also asking them what memories are conjured in them when they're interacting with these spices and these herbs. And so a lot of this is really thinking about how do we make these forms of memory something that can help us reimagine how we collect stories from people who are survivors of war and atrocity, but also how do we make it accessible to the public and have everybody um, create an opportunity for everybody to join in and connect. All right. So the second project is Subverting Empire's Plate, Daughters of the Diaspora. And this was a collaboration between myself and Jalika Sal, who is a professor at CUNY Lehman in New York City, based in the Bronx. And she is actually also a daughter of the diaspora, but the Senegalese diaspora. And whenever she would come visit my home, she would just like notice different things. You know, I'm Vietnamese, she's Senegalese, and we're noticing all the foods that we both have in our kitchens, even though we're from different places, but we were connecting it to the impacts of French colonialism in the French Empire. And so we had this opportunity to do a project in Dakar in Senegal. And I remember this amazing exhibition at the New Museum by Tuan Andrew Nguyen that focused on Senegalese Vietnamese diaspora in Senegal itself. That was a result of during the Indochina War, France Vietnam was fighting for its independence, and France ended up sending all these African soldiers to Vietnam to fight. And many of them actually came from Senegal, and they were known as the Tirailleurs Sénégalais. And pardon my French, it's not very good, but then they ended up marrying Vietnamese women, having children with them, and then the children migrated back to Dakar. And so this is Jalika on the left side and me on the right side, and we're thinking, and we're right on the Atlantic Ocean, and we're really thinking about these histories of migration and shared passageways in all these different forms. And this is still raw footage. I'm still piecing together the video, the archival photographs, the real-time photographs that we took when we were there, but we interviewed amazing people who are Senegalese and Vietnamese. And we, oh, I'm looking at time. Thank you. And uh, yeah, they told stories about food and how people came together. We took portraits of them. And so it's just really here. I want to show you some of the pictures of them cooking egg rolls, some of the street food that came from this history of colonialism, some of the amazing photographs that they had in their albums of how they shared food. And it's just really thinking about like the power of food as a way of bringing people together and connecting folks to share knowledge, share, strategies for survival in the diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen, for the wonderful, wonderful talk. And now, may I call on the rest of our panelists to join us now. We're going to have a moderated panel discussion amongst us, among the panelists, moderated by me. And this is a great panel of various artists, various scholars, various genres and media to talk about essentially art and resistance. As an artist myself, there is one thing that I encounter a lot when it comes to art and resistance is the notion of friction. we come from various backgrounds, but if there's one thing that is undeniable is that we encounter friction in our work, whether with our collaborators or with funding or with the reality of various factors that create the art itself. So this is my question to start with to all of you is what kinds of friction are present in your work that you feel primarily, and how do you deal with those kinds of frictions, however you may define them? And let's just start in order of our presenters. So maybe you start with Azmyl.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I think friction is very important, right? I depend on friction. This is I try to minimize. I minimize friction with my collaborators a lot. Primarily, that's why I find people are the same boat. Of course, there's creative friction, etc. But I think the main friction that really drives me is in my encounters with the hegemony, the cultural hegemony in Malaysia, which is the predominantly, again, part of I'm the majority, but the majority political voices don't speak for me, and a lot of us, we're kind of the minority in the majority. But taking that positionality is quite important. I think I need that friction, and that friction's informed a lot my later work, which tends to be, songs tend to be about social and cultural critique. So yeah, I depend a lot on that hegemonic friction because that drives both my work as an artist and also as a researcher.
Thank you for that, Azmyl. How about you, Annie? Words on friction.
For me, there's friction of time, especially if you have to manage as teachers, the academic work and your art making, friction of scheduling things, coordinating. But in relationships with collaborators, it's it's beautiful, it's beautiful when you collaborate. The friction is in the funding. The friction comes in equipment. Yeah, looking for equipment or sometimes technical stuff. Like I work with projectors. I need to be able to set up the projector within a space and make those tiny details that are really stressful. So yeah, and yeah, funding is a really um, um, problem. Is a problem for most of the projects. No, so or endeavors. No, it's something that blocks your way. So it's nice that when people or artists collaborate and it's just a genuine um drive to create. So we we do with what we have and then find sources of funding later on. Yeah.
Thank you, Annie. How about you, Dr. Nguyen? Friction.
I love this question of friction. The first thing that came to mind to me was translation and thinking about translation in all these different ways, from the translation literally of like linguistic language, because the project I did in Senegal, we did an interview and we spoke across four different languages. We spoke in French, English, Wolof, and Vietnamese, and then having to then translate that into a conceptual idea for a project, and then translating that into like what objects, materials, symbols, gestures are we going to use, and then translating that with like, as Annie was saying, like being academics, right? You're like working with theory, you're working with different methodologies and trying to also integrate that in. So it's like so many different realms of translations that are happening simultaneously, and different ways of thinking and being and knowing, and that's every juncture of that is all friction. But it's super generative because sometimes what is most kind of like a gift is when the friction stops you and then you're stuck. And then I think that gives birth to something else because you're like, why is this stopping me? What is stopping me? Am I supposed to step over it? Am I supposed to hide under it? Am I supposed to loop around it? Like, what do I need to do? So it becomes kind of like a creative obstacle that actually births um, a more nuanced kind of entry point into the work.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the answers. What is very unique, and we're lucky to have a panel of artists who also happen to be scholars and vice versa, right? So there's a certain form of creativity, but also reflexivity with the work that we're doing. So the next question relates to censorship. There are a lot of factors, as we've already explored with our own work with friction. We all know that we deal with certain forms of censorship, especially with state apparatuses and governments, and also rules with funding and whatever resources we may have. But is there a point where we anticipate these and then self-censor ourselves as artists? And how do you deal with those things, anticipating censorship? That's very different from facing censorship. Now you're anticipating it. And how does that affect your work?
Okay, I think it's a great question because one of the reasons why I operate the way I do is because I don't want to think about some censorship. Of course, it limits a lot of my opportunities in terms of, let's say, airplay, being a music, but that's not really what I'm looking at. Funding. I mean, early on, I decided why I found rock and roll, found music early on. Film is a lot more lengthy. It depends a lot of funding. It's not an immediate art form. You can't be spontaneous. You can't improvise. And there's a less what I call that liminal space of the live space you're in. And I think that's why I chose being a performer, a singer-songwriter, but also operating solo is also quite important because I'm mobile. I keep overheads really low. I think that's the main thing. When you keep your overhead low, not just economically, but also reputationally, and risk assessing yourself. Because with my band stuff, I don't go so risky because I have friends who are involved. I don't want them to be, but I always joke about it. Where's my trophy? Because I've never been arrested, never been in trouble because I tend to play with language. I tend to play with words and that kind of, authorities look for something a lot more tangible right away. Like my friend Fahmi Reza, who's a graphic artist and he's a political graphic artist, always gets in trouble because again, a poster, a visual piece is, I think, a lot more immediate, easy to point out. Where a song, they probably don't have patience, like which part of the lyrics. So I use the form that way to kind of bypass that. And I think the biggest problem among artists who aren't within this subcultural circle that I exist in, some of the people I shared, is this idea of self-censorship. I think the biggest danger is self-censorship. It's easy to blame. I think a lot of Malaysian filmmakers and musicians tend to point a finger to the larger, power structure. Oh, censorship can't do this. But I've kind of proven them wrong. That there are these spaces in, especially live performances and also songwriting, depending how you address things. Unmask it a certain way using humor. It's a very Malay thing to Malay language has this way of saying something indirectly, and I think that's a dying art, which I wouldn't say I'm reviving it, but I'm just adapting that, which I find missing in a lot of Malaysian kind of contemporary songs. But just because I have this kind of like subcultural thing, the punk thing, so people tend to overlook that, because I write in Malay and English, I'm bilingual, and I'm writing more Malay because a lot of people tend to come back to me and say, your Malay sounds interesting. I find it resonates better. And I think that's the main thing, is not to be, I operate that way to circumvent censorship. I'm aware of it, but I like it. I think it's important to have that notion of censorship because then okay, what hasn't been done, what people don't have the guts to do, So that's my path. So it makes my job easier, honestly. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Azmyl. How about you, Annie? The question of self-censorship.
Censorship. Oh, I was taking notes about you anticipating censorship as an artist. I think in relevance to, for example, having an exhibit, um, it will be difficult for emerging artists, for example, to book a show in an established gallery, for example. And I think it also depends on the artist. Artists who are really relying on validation would self-censor just to achieve something that they want, like to have a show in this particular gallery or to have this crowd or to have this art circle to penetrate. No? But if that doesn't matter with you, uh, the nice thing that is happening now is there is like divergence. No? There are different small galleries putting up. There are collaborations of independent and artist-run spaces that are creating their own festivals, and artists now can put out their work without the censorship or the initial screening of some mainstream galleries, for example, or commercial galleries who may screen, no, some works. No? So uh, those kinds of anticipation they come, but it depends on the artist. But it's good that there are different venues now to express art and to put out art and collaborate with different independent artists as well.
The notion of spaces is really important. Like, which spaces are you entering, and that makes you, what kind of work will you produce is also based on the spaces and the
Yes.
space within the spaces. True. How about you, Dr. Nguyen? What are or have you encountered experiences such as that in self-censorship?
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I love that emphasis on space because if you're working in these smaller galleries, especially in Southeast Asia or in these kind of DIY spaces, like people understand, like really are invested in the work and supporting artists in a way where like they are working with you to navigate that censorship or state surveillance. And so it builds a different layer and level of community in so many ways. But I wanted to think about also the question of self-censorship and that when I'm working with others who might be more vulnerable to the state in some ways, then I have to kind of play with language a little bit more to be able to like get past certain gates in some ways to get to the show or to get to the performance or to get to the exhibit or to get the funding, right? And then when you have that you can play in a different way. It can go all these different directions. But it does have this calculated risk has to consider if it's just me or if it's with others who have different vulnerabilities in relation to what's happening. Because for me, my priority ethically is always to protect others, and in making sure that they're in a safer position. Um, and and yeah, I think that it's also for me personally, it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't in some ways, right? And so it's like we're in so many ways, artists are surveilled because people know the power of art. People know the potential of what it can do to shift our consciousness, to make us believe in things, right? To to help us like have an analysis of power dynamics in ways that maybe other forms can't, or just like touch our hearts and spirits and bring us together in a way that, probably other practices or methods can't. And so it's kind of knowing that and asking oneself like what are we willing to risk in this moment. But also I was thinking about what Azmyl was saying, is that how you say your name earlier? And I just feel like Southeast Asian artists are so, and just the way that society functions, they're so clever with language. There's a way that you can say what you need to say, what you play with it in a different way that being born in the US, it's too blunt sometimes. It's too direct and obvious that it lacks a little bit of of imagination, I would say, that I think is like to the credit of Southeast Asia, Southeast Asian artists and Southeast Asian society. Not that it's all the same, but that there's a different way of navigating that I think we can all learn from.
Thank you for all the answers. Now, I have one last question before I move on to the general public questions. What short advice would you give to an emerging Southeast Asian artist?
Wow, advice. Uh, uh, I mean, I always tell people just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I'm thinking in the sense of staying relevant. This isn't an advice just about starting, but I think the resilience comes with sticking to your guns. I think this goes with I think my parents are both in agriculture. So they always talked about resilience in the sense that farmers, stay resilient. You just keep on doing it, but there's a lot of people give up. And I think there's a direct link with cultural practices, or agriculture is the words derived from that. So I guess my advice is just if you're thinking of how relevant your work is going to be, just keep on doing it, because if you're doing something against the grain or on the margins, it won't be understood now. It will be understood later. Hence, when you conflate the idea of art making with the notion of funding is one thing, but also as a means to earn a living, that gets difficult because then you compromise a lot. And like I think both my fellow panelists mentioned about censorship, right? You become concerned about the people who are part of your work, but also the people who depend on you, your family, all right, your immediate partners. So that's my advice. I think just stick to your guns, and stay resilient, and because from then you start for looking for different methods of sustaining your work. I think that's quite important. Just staying resilient and sticking to your guns, so to say. Yeah, that's advice.
Thank you, Azmyl. Annie.
I agree with that. And I encourage young artists. Uh, this is in the sense of, or the context of materiality, at least. Like young women, while you don't have any families yet or a child, go and do what you can do as artists, because it will be more difficult. It's not impossible, but it is more difficult once you have a child to care for as well, no, alongside art making. And take advantage of everything, of all the technology available to you. For example, there are young artists who want to apply for residencies. Do not wait for any gatekeeper to grant you that opportunity. You can access it. You can take control or take the lead and seek where you want to soar or to show your art. And collaborating is also good for you and enriching to your art making. So that's what I can share with younger artists.
Thank you, Annie. Dr. Nguyen?
I actually would echo what both of my co-panelists said, and just emphasize, yeah, I love what Azmyl said about sticking to your guns, really believing in what you want to say and what you want to express and seeing that through, because there will be, and also like what Annie's saying, like, and the how women have to navigate the art scene in so many ways, and mothers too, right? There's going to not only be censorship, but also patriarchy and all, like all these different conditions that make it hard for young people, women, trans, queer, all these different identities. And it can impact their voice and what they want to say. So to kind of to continue to trust themselves and to believe in themselves and to build community with the people that they can continue to trust in so many ways.
Thank you so much for that. And I hope younger artists who are watching this sometime in the future will hear these advice. It's great. Now I'm going to move on to the questions that we have from the audience. The first one that we have here is from an anonymous attendee, and the question is, how might the concept of zomia as an identity that resists assimilation into dominant state systems, that is zomia. So how might the concept of zomia help us think about how artists and scholars like you carve out intellectual or creative highlands of autonomy where alternative narratives and practices can thrive beyond institutional or political control?
That's a cool term. I've never heard that word zomia, so I guess I fall into that. I read a song called Zomia, but Zomia Blues. I mean, it takes, I think, an outsider, a third party, to see where you're at. Because to be honest, yes, my parents were also professors, so they kind of cycled me to doing my masters, and they convinced me you can still do your music, but you can teach part time. So I fell into academia by default in that way. But it was through serendipity that I was teaching a program, teaching course in culture studies, and this professor from the other university, which was franchising, they were public university franchising this small college I was teaching at, said, do you have any other works? Have you written something? So I wrote this little essay when I was doing my master's about moral panics and subculture. So my entire academic career was based on that one essay I wrote in a cultural studies class in my master's uh, program. And it takes an outsider to convince me to say, hey, publish this. And later on, they also said, look, I was asking them, these professors, like, what field, what's your research about? I said, look, you just look around you. You're in the subculture. You have access. You're a participant. Uh, you are outside of this institutional system yourself. Leverage that. And I think from there on, I started realizing that it takes a third party to really look at you and tell you, hey, you're in this privileged spot which other scholars might not have. And that's when I started, why not? I have access, I speak to people, the friends. So um, I guess that's one way I've always operated. And that became my kind of my 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 field, right? And it is it's convinced me to remain autonomous, especially my research in university. But of course, my university is not, they expect me to get grants, all that stuff. I haven't spoken about the blues of being an academic. That's another thing. So in other words, I've been publishing with zero funding because I have access to this. And a lot what I do is I don't really need funding because I'm already in the field. So I guess that gives me a lot of autonomy. Being a Zomia, yeah, I think hopefully that answers the question. So both informs each other. I think my as an artist and a scholar, even though I'm in a film and theater department, I think that's even better because I'm not teaching music all the time. I think I'll be sick of it. If I'm teaching music, I'm doing music. So I see the other landscape. I've adopted a lot of things from theater. I've learned from my previous HOD, was a theater practitioner. Like this whole lecture performance thing is something I picked up from theater. And also film is my collaborations, my music videos with filmmakers and students. So the autonomy is actually very important to me. Nobody tells me what to do. But then autonomy can also be very scary because the onus is on you. Yeah. So yeah.
How about our two other panelists? I want to tackle that question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
For the person that wrote that question, can you also share more where the concept comes from? Because that's so interesting, and
Yeah.
I would love to learn more. But I enter this work, and I really think about it as a child of refugees. Like I think about how my parents arrived to the U.S. in like poor, right? Like they had to kind of find clever ways to escape the country. They had to find clever ways to create a life for themselves in a whole new country where they didn't know the language, where it was extremely racist, or it still is very much so, and create the conditions to live a good life and to like support their children. So for me, that is the ethos of what it means to challenge this notion of being usurped by the state and really trying to reimagine like taking that ethos of being a child of refugees and seeing possibility and seeing through like the enforcement and the surveillance of the state and trying to reimagine the commons. Like, so for example, if I'm looking on the street, like we can do a performance on the street, but we should do it and not ask for permission. And then we should run away when when they come, right? Like it's like trying to kind of think about like how can we reimagine these spaces that are utilized in the common sense in a particular way and flip it and recreate what it could be and try not to ask for permission, right? To do it, but do it with the consensus of the people that it's actually for versus actually seeking like permits and permissions from the state. And I know that gets certain people in trouble, so you have to kind of navigate that. But there's also, I feel like people's homes, there used to be this really cool, amazing festival in Chicago called the Chicago Home Theater Festival. And people would just host these like theater festivals in their home, in their living room. I performed in a bathtub, like in the bathroom. And it's just like really thinking about performance and art can take place in so many different places. And it's up to us to imagine where and who we want to do that with and to kind of scrap together the resources or leverage resources with the various institutions we might be a part of, and kind of play Robin Hood if we want?
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Can I
that.
just add to that? That's very
Sure,
interesting.
yes.
Yeah, because I've been at I've been at moments sometimes co-opted into the institutions and systems. Like during pandemic, I was made a industry advisor, even though I have no sympathy for the music industry because I think it's utterly corrupt. Anyway, but this government body that looks at the creative industry and funding. But I felt great being in there, so I can see how the system works. And I saw from within how it works. I realized it's not. It was a education, a very short education, understanding that okay, I think I don't need to be part of this institution, the system. But the irony is that they're calling people like me, and of course, my tenure was only 2 years, but and being a judge on the Kakisani thing was interesting. You start to see, I think, don't resist. I think if institution calls you in to be an advisor, go for it, Um, as a Zomia, I think it's interesting, but don't forget that lah. Don't be seduced. Like, wow, institution is great. I love this. But going in is also quite important. Then you realize like how, there's what are the limits? And sometimes a lot the intentions are not what it seems, right? A lot of this kind of government institutional bodies. Yeah. So just want to add that because yeah, it was a good point brought up.
We have
Sorry,
time for
sorry. I
no,
just wanted
please.
to echo that because it's so easy to get co-opted. I think in addition to censorship, it's co-optation. Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of our questions right now relates to co-optation, really, in the state. So it's good that we're discussing this. So for the last question, very shortly, I'd just like to combine all of the questions, like the main meat, and then try to summarize them. Is that one is how do we deal with co-optation and with the state and censorship? And second is what kinds of support do we get as artists? What either financial, emotional, legal? What kinds of support have you leaned on as artists when you experience these challenges of censorship or co-optation or friction?
Oh, I think again the at least for me because the body is part of what I do, right? Because I'm a performer, people sees me, there's images of me. Um, and being male, maybe this is why I think feminist thought is so important in how it shape how I navigate the body, right? Hence, like for example, I think hi Chandi, I saw your question there, like student of mine. Anyway, yeah, so it's also the fact that using names, like changing my name a bit to kind of like flip the patriarchal narrative, not being co-opted into that, because there are certain expectations to perform as a Malay male, as a Malay Muslim, what you're supposed to be and that. And I find that interesting because men don't really think about that a lot. But at least from my experience, there's a different different sort of sensibility and even approach to, I think one of the co-panelists talked about time, that I think time is also very gendered as a performer. You know, you do think about that. You think about changes of becoming, and I think that's something is separate. But I think being co-opted into the system is something that's constant in my head about yes, my style, my genre, my music is pretty straightforward. Yeah, but there's intention there because I need to make my storytelling crisp and direct, or short. So I'm not genre based. That's already me getting out of the co-op. I can't be co-opted into music festivals, etc. Because there's a sound. Festivals are looking for sound. They're not interested in the storytelling, how unique, interesting you are. So, for example, me doing these lecture performances are also a way of getting out the co-op, being, I guess, co-opted into the academic kind of like institutionalized way of like, oh, you go there, you seek funding, get a grant, but I've managed to find a different ways of funding, which you know, I wouldn't say maybe it's not happy about it, but there's no flow into the university. I'm sustaining myself. So there's that also being co-opted into it. And again, music is just, I think, such a everybody listens to music, everybody consumes music. So there's a sense that is people's comments to me are often good signs of whether they think I'm co-opted or not. Like they see I get covered in the press. They say, "Hey, oh, you're making money now. Huh? You're in the press." I said, "Well, that's got nothing to do with money making. That's just the job. They write about you because you got something new, right?" Um, so I think it's always a seesaw. I think in dealing with co-optation. Um, but for me personally, because I guess I have the academic training of thinking about this coming from cultural studies, is that yeah, I think the co-optation and navigating, avoiding, refusing. I think refusal is a very good term too. Is constant, and I need that. Actually, I need to operate with very clear understanding of co-optation.
Thank you, Azmyl. And for two panelists, any final
Um,
responses to that general prompt?
Mine would be on a personal note. While Asmil was talking about the patriarchy or and his action to use his mother's surname instead. Me, I'm from a broken marriage, so I now establishing my own identity, which is difficult in the sense that my ex-husband is also an artist and a professor in the same university. So yeah, so that's a resistance as well, or detangling of associations so that both identities can emerge from apart from each other and just thrive, coexist, for example. But in the university, for example, I try to manage my own art practice apart from my teaching, which is easy for me because I teach graphic design and my practice is in the visual arts. But sometimes I also do invite students or encourage them to engage in community practices and art making that will be fruitful for them in the long run, or they can opt for if they want to, which is outside the classroom usually.
Thank you. And with Dr. Nguyen, last words for our folks.
Yes, I have, I think, two main thoughts. One is that in the same way that you asked the question about self-censorship, I'm kind of always having to be emotionally and mentally prepared for co-optation. So I feel like it's kind of in the same way where we talked about censorship kind of being here, right? I also feel co-optation is also here, and it's very strong in terms of like the capitalist impulse for profit and extraction of ideas and people and resources and, just bodies, right? And so it's always having to be prepared, knowing that whatever I put out there it might be plagiarized, it might be co-opted, and like it's and so how do you try to stay right on the edge of it in some ways to kind of play with that question of friction you asked and always try to be ahead of it in some ways. And also with the question that was asked in the chat box about how can we be accountable to our communities or that our actions aren't just performative but actually embodied, I think all of the panelists have touched on it in terms of like who are the communities we're accountable to, and the people that we're working with and making sure that they're taken care of and that we're ethically orienting ourselves to like these various dynamics that are at play and making sure that we're working collectively to protect each other in some ways. And as a quick example, my work in food, I've also done mutual aid food distribution projects for people on the streets in Chicago. And so there's all these different ways to imagine how we interact with the public and interact with different communities to ground the artist practice.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nguyen, and to all our panelists, Azmyl, Annie, and Dr. Nguyen, for spending time with us to share your experiences about art and resistance. Art is an endless endeavor. We can go on and on and on and on about this. But as we said, time is one of our friction and constraints. So I will give the floor now to our dear colleague and associate director for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies here at the University of Hawaii, Dr. Teri Skillman.
Thank you so much. This was an amazing webinar, and Miriam our director had to drop off just a few minutes ago, but she said to convey her appreciation for your time and your knowledge. Paul, thank you so much for moderating and organizing with us for this webinar. Annie, Azmyl, and Patricia, it was such a profound discussion. We hope that we get more people to come and listen to our recording, which we will let you know when it's posted on YouTube. I'd also like to call your attention to our next webinar, which is on the first Wednesday of April. So please mark your calendars. The focus of the next talk will be on smart cities in Southeast Asia. And I won't hold you any longer. We're already a little bit over time. Please do take our survey. It will help us improve, and we do seriously read everything that people write on our surveys. So please take it seriously and give us your input. And we will really, again, panelists and Paul as moderator, appreciate your time and knowledge. So I hope you have a very good day from Southeast Asia and a good evening here in Honolulu and a good night, Patricia, where you are on the East Coast. So thank you so much. Aloha.